Okay, this morning I thought it would be fun to talk about memorable connections that I've made with people in spirit. I've done hundreds of readings with people, and some of those have been very memorable, either because they were funny or they were really interesting. But the ones that got me thinking about to do this video was where the person in spirit gave me a different perspective on a situation or a different perspective about people in general, in a way that people here in physical life, I don't experience that with. Because when you're connected with someone in spirit, you're seeing things from their perspective, you're feeling things from their perspective, which I don't know. So I'll just start because there's some interesting, I've had some interesting connections. So I have to say, when I'm connected, I do allow people in spirit to have me actually feel things, um, good and bad things. So if something is painful, for example, I allow that because it's temporary and I know it's not really happening. So sometimes I've felt discomfort or outright pain, but mostly I'm aware of what they experienced. So I don't necessarily feel it myself. So one young man I was connected with, I knew he had taken either an arrow or a bullet in the eye. And I knew it was sudden. I felt this sudden pressure, and then I was on the other side. It was really quick. So there was no pain for me in that experience, but it's that kind of thing where I'm aware of what's happened because I know I knew something had caught me right in the eye. But the one that gave me the idea in particular for this video was I recently connected with a man who made me feel, I knew when he was here, he had felt so overwhelmed by life. If you've ever had a bunch of tasks to do that you didn't want to do and you didn't have enough time to do them, that sense of overwhelmment, have you ever felt overwhelmed for anything? If you could dial that up by like 1,000, that's how this guy felt all the time. Overwhelmed is not a strong enough word, but it's the closest word that I have to describe what this man was feeling all the time. I knew he couldn't possibly function in society and feel this way, and I knew he always felt this way. I knew at family gatherings he could just like walk around the corner into another room and just quietly start to cry and stand there and feeling ashamed of not being able to control how he felt. And so this was in a circle of other mediums. And so the sitter, so one of them said, "Oh, I know exactly who you're with." And it was a relative of hers who had had PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, while he was here. And she said he couldn't function. In normal life, sometimes he'd hide under beds or he'd hide in closets. He was completely overwhelmed. And it surprised me when she said that, and this was his experience of PTSD, because I'm sure other people have experienced that differently. But I had always thought of that as maybe being sensitive to loud noises or getting angry or sad uncontrollably. But this man, this terrible, terrible sense of overwhelmment was so sad. And it's really made me sympathetic, much more sympathetic to people who have to go through that. I have connected, I keep a spreadsheet of all of the readings that I do, and I connect with men about 60% of the time. A slim majority of the people I connect with are men. And I've connected with several men who are loving people. They do anything for their loved ones, but they cannot bring themselves to say the words, "I love you." They just can't get those words out. And I used to think, because I know men like this in physical life now, and I used to think that they didn't really care, or they didn't feel it strongly enough, or it wasn't important enough to them to be able to express that to people who needed to hear that. Because my logical side of me was thinking, well, if you can say one, two, three, or "I am hungry," then you can say "I love you." I mean, it's 3 words. That's all you have to say. But these men, several men that I've connected with in the spirit, have made me feel this intense internal struggle trying to say those words, desperately wanting to say those words and not being able to. They just didn't have the skill set to do it, which is, again, really sad, like really sad. So that's changed my perspective on that kind of person who has trouble expressing themselves, even when they deeply, powerfully want to express themselves. I've also connected with several previously abusive fathers. The most interesting one of those was, I didn't know that he was abusive. I just knew I had a man on the father's side of the family, parents' generation. And this guy made me feel like I was slipping uncontrollably forward. Like if you were sliding down a very steep hill uncontrollably, it was that feeling, except it was horizontal. It was moving forward. And what he did was triggered a memory of mine where I had been driving someone else's car and the brakes failed. I wasn't going that fast, but I tapped the brakes to slow down because there were cars in front of me and my foot went all the way to the floor. And I was like, ah! So I was able to maneuver around a couple cars in front of me and slowly glide to a stop. But the first 2 or 3 seconds of realizing I had no brakes and no way of stopping the car was terrible. It was this terrible out of control feeling. That's how this man made me feel, like I was sliding forward uncontrollably. And then all of these abusive parent issues came up, scenes from movies, things I had witnessed at friends' houses, in relatives' houses in my childhood. And I knew, for example, this guy, Child Protective Services did get involved. His son was my client, and he told me, yeah, CPS got involved and took them away at one point. He used to make them stand at the table, stand at attention, and just look at their food. And then he'd allow them eventually, sometimes after a few seconds or several minutes, they could sit down. Even then, they had to just look at their food, and then he'd give them permission to eat. And what I was saying was my friends who train service dogs, they do that. They put their food in front of them and the dog just has to look at it and then they tell them okay, or whatever the word is, and then they eat. It was that level of controlling his children and even his wife. So what I knew to say to his son, to my client, was that every time this man was rigidly, ridiculously controlling like that, it assuaged those feelings of out of control slipping forward. Every time he was abusive, it felt like he was in charge, and it assuaged, it comforted that terrible out of control slipping forward feeling. And so his behavior had nothing to do with how he felt about his loved ones. It had nothing to do with their behavior. No one brought it on themselves. It was this guy trying to make that terrible feeling in himself be less. So what was interesting about that particular contact was I've had a lot of people apologize through me. They've shown me how badly they behaved, and eventually they get to an I'm sorry or feelings of chagrin or regret. This guy didn't do that. He just was explaining his behavior. There was no apology, and it was weird. But I feel, so reflecting on that now, I think he must have known his son was not ready to hear any kind of apology, because I've definitely had many people apologize through me. This guy didn't. And it was such an abuse. I'm editing out a lot. There was such scenes of abuse going through my head that, yeah, it was one of my most interesting and very saddest connections ever. Several people in spirit, really common with parents and grandparents, will make my heart suddenly expand and I just want to burst into tears. I'm so full of love and happiness and just this loving affection. And that's how I know sometimes that I'm with a parent or grandparent, because I'll have, woman, father's side of the family, grandparents' generation, my heart will start to explode. And I'm like, oh, this is a grandma. Like, you can feel, it's wonderful to feel that really intense love and affection for somebody. Yeah, so that's really neat that doesn't stop in my experience. If anything, those feelings become easier and stronger when we're free of the physical body, free of the physical environment. One of the coolest connections I ever had was during a Charlie Kelly class. He was doing a mediumship class. It's a couple hours long, I think. And I was paired in a one-on-one breakout room with this woman, and I got a friend of hers, and it was a peer to her. It was a woman. And this woman, so I got a bunch of stuff about her. And then this woman started to make me feel this intense thankfulness toward this woman, toward the sitter. Huge relief. It was a profound gratitude, more than I've ever felt before since. It was profound gratitude. That's the best way to explain it. And I said, you must have done something hugely significant for this woman. And it felt intimate, but I told her that. I said, it feels intimate, but it has to be more than just taking care of her at the end of her life, because I'm feeling this overwhelming sense of gratitude for whatever this hugely significant thing you did for her. And she smiled. She got a big smile on her face. And she said, when that woman died, she took in and adopted her child. And I said, oh, that definitely explains the intense gratitude that I'm feeling towards you. So it was really cool to be a part of that. I said in another video, I typically get genders the first thing I get. I'm aware that someone's there. I know if it's a man or a woman. And so I was sitting for someone. I get this really vital, powerful presence right next to me, and I could not tell if it was a man or a woman, it was weird. And I kept feeling into that. I said, I know I have somebody here. This is rare for me not to just slip right into like side of the family or their gender. I was just super aware of what a powerful, vital, healthy presence they were. And I couldn't get their gender. And I finally, in my head, I said, I don't care what you are. What else can you show me? And in my head, it immediately resolved into a horse. And that was the first time that, first or second time, I think it was the first time that an animal had come through. And I realized from that experience that I had unconsciously been expecting a person every time. And so after that, since then I've occasionally gotten animals like dogs, cats, a cow, I think a bird or two, various animals I've gotten since then. But that was kind of the first major, they're not all people that want to communicate, people in spirit. So and then the last one I'll tell you about is I was reading for a friend of mine, and she's also a medium, and we were just sort of exchanging readings. And I have to be vague about this. I got someone for her who was a senior citizen when she passed. And the senior citizen was showing me the very end of her life in a nursing home. So I knew my friend had been visiting her, had been like doing her makeup and keeping her clean and just being very kind and very gentle and loving to this woman. And I knew that she had been a lot of fun in her youth. And this old woman in my head, who I've connected with, she looks at me and she starts like, oh, you're very good looking. And like talking about how she found me attractive. And then I burst out laughing and I said, she's literally running her hand up the inside of my thigh. And it feels like a joke, but she's definitely doing that. And my friend burst out laughing and she said, oh, she was being really inappropriate like that with the male nurses in the nursing home at the end of her life. What you're seeing is everything you're getting is at the end of her life. It was very funny. No one's ever done that to me before. I was totally okay with it. Yeah, so that was certainly a connection that I will never forget. So the upshot for me, the unexpected upshot for me of doing mediumship is connecting with people in spirit and seeing things from their perspective and feeling things from their perspective, and just narrating what I'm feeling for the client to make sense of. It's made me much more sympathetic with people who struggle with being their best selves while they're here. Much more sympathetic. It's the totally unexpected for me, unexpected side of mediumship. So that's that subject. Leave your questions or comments below, and I'll try to do a video about that. Next week, I'm going to talk about synchronicities, which is like when you keep saying 11:11 on a clock, that kind of thing. That's been happening to me a lot ever since I started engaging in mediumship. It never really used to happen before. I mean, occasionally, but not like consistently like it does now. So until then, thank you for watching today and see you next time.